Okay, next in the history of space shuttle model kits, we have the young astronauts release of Monogram's 172 scale space shuttle with fuel tank and solid rocket boosters. This is the big one. This is the biggest shuttle kit of them all. Unfortunately, it suffered from a really bad case of bad timing when it was released. The kit was announced early 1986, even possibly late 1985, and it came out not long after Challenger disintegrated on STS-51L. As a result, I don't know if a lot of these kits were sold, and for years I didn't even know this kit even existed, even though I was a collector of space shuttle models. Finally, I was made aware that these did come out, and this was in the time period before the internet came out, and I was able to acquire one. Young Astronauts was a program to try to get youths interested in the space program. It kind of paralleled Huntsville, Alabama's Space Camp, except whereas Space Camp was a camp that you could actually go to, Young Astronauts was a program where youths could send off for information on space programs, astronauts, and all that. And these specially themed model kits were put out to have them build something of the space program. Other than, to my knowledge, these kits were only around for maybe about 2 years before they disappeared, but many people bought them, and you do see a few of them pop up on eBay these days, from anywhere from pretty reasonable prices to pretty downright absurd prices. Now, this kind of showcases the approach that model companies were taking in the 1980s, in that pictures of the actual model subject on the front of the box have been replaced by really nice looking artwork. There are pictures of the completed shuttle stack on the side panels. And these Young Astronauts kits also included a poster or two and information on how to join the Young Astronauts program. The orbiter itself was essentially the same as the earlier released Monogram orbiter, not the Revell orbiter. There is a difference. And pretty much all they did was they just tooled up 2 additional holes in the bottom so it would fit on the newly tooled external tank and solid rocket boosters. Okay, moving on. Here's the next entry. This showcases the box art that Revell used in the mid to late 1980s. I don't know for sure, but I believe this style of box art was originally introduced circa 1985. And it showcases the classic Revell 1980s blue border and artwork instead of pictures of crappily built model kits on the box. This one features Discovery. By this point, Revell had discontinued the 747 with Space Shuttle model, and I don't believe they were making the 1/288 scale Union kits anymore. But they were still doing the orbiter by itself, and they were doing the Space Shuttle with boosters, and they were also doing the 172 scale orbiter. Revell's 172 scale orbiter was around until about 1989, I believe. Of course, in 1986, we all remember what happened in January that year when Challenger disintegrated over Florida on mission STS-51L. And it did kind of affect Space Shuttle model kit sales, as it were, but Revell did soldier on and continued to keep a Space Shuttle kit in their catalog for quite a number of years. This particular example dates from the early 1990s, hence in the lower corner here it says skill level number 2. At about this point, Revell and Monogram were actually both purchased by the same group of investors, and they began sharing tooling. Although Revell's Space Shuttle with boosters and 1/144th was the only example of a shuttle tooling in that scale that they still had, so they kept making it. And here you can see an example of a standard issue monogram kit. At least I think it's a standard issue monogram kit from the same time period. I don't know that Monogram ever actually issued these kits in 1986 with this style of packaging. However, the full stack shuttle kit was reissued in 1999 as part of Revell Monogram's Selected Subjects program, and as a result they did offer it in a packaging very similar to what it was in the 1980s. Monogram's Black Border days, and pretty much all the kits that Monogram did in this time period, including their standard 172 orbiter without boosters, featured these black borders top and bottom in this gray surround and the yellow border for the picture. So if they did this version of the kit back then, really cool. If they didn't, it is nice that the reissue contains those markings. The Selected Subjects reissue of the kit in 1999 was a limited reissue. Relatively small number of the kits were made, but it gave people a chance to purchase the kit if they missed out on the original 1986 version. I was one such person who missed out on the original. I had one, but when I had the opportunity to get one of these kits brand new, I didn't hesitate and I took the plunge. Well, if I'm going to spend time talking about the Moonraker and the Alien Invader kits that Revell did in the late 1970s, I suppose I gotta take a few moments to talk about what you see in front of you. This is the Armageddon Space Shuttle with Armadillo drilling unit from the movie Armageddon. Revell, at this time known as Revell Monogram, if you look close, there's an example of the Revell Monogram logo in the upper corner. Revell Monogram decided to get a kit license for what was advertised to be the big blockbuster movie of the summer 1998 season. And it was not a bad film. I had high hopes for this kit that they were going to do a really good job, but it turned out all they did was they took their standard Revell shuttle tooling and modified it with new wings and new parts to turn it into something that looked kind of like the X-71 super shuttles you saw in the film, but mostly like just a regular shuttle with new decals, new wings, these little stub wings on top of the fuselage and the auxiliary rocket boosters. So it fits in the chronology of space shuttle kits. It doesn't look like they permanently altered the tooling or anything, because when they and Revell of Germany issued their shuttle kits about 5 or 6 years later, the old tooling looked like it hadn't been altered at all, so it was kind of a nice attempt. In terms of sales, well, these kits did not perform well sales-wise, near as I could tell, and about 3 years later we were finding examples of them at like the toy liquidator outlets. At least I was. I do have a couple in my collection though, because they make good fodder for sci-fi space shuttle kit bashes. But there's probably the last example of space shuttle as a model kit for a major licensed property.